Hi there, my name's McKenna and this is my curriculum journey. The day that my curriculum journey began was when I started kindergarten. My first day of school was an easy day for me. I made friends fairly easily. I socialized and I learned things that I did not realize I was learning. I started school in 2007 and I attended a full French immersion elementary school where the only things we learned in English was English class. At this point, I had no idea what a hidden curriculum was and that every day I was learning from it. The things I said, the way I spoke to people, and the way the hidden messages and the way the teachers used to play with me made a huge contribution to the way that I began to learn. I became intelligent in the way that I spoke. I used to say things like vehicle instead of car, like most kids would, because my teachers taught me how to speak in two languages. I began being able to differentiate and translate two languages without realizing it, and this hidden theme of education was a constant for me throughout elementary school. However, when I got into my later years of elementary, I started to become more aware of my education, my peers, and my efforts. Starting in the 7th grade, I made no effort to meet my own goals or outcomes because I felt that people around me being more successful than me. I made the decision in the 8th grade to open my eyes and pay more attention to my education. This was when the representation of product teaching style was first shown to me. My 8th grade teacher would shame students who weren't smart enough and praised those who were. Even though my eyes had been opened, I hadn't yet come to the realization that this was because the curriculum was written for a certain type of student. When I went into high school, I struggled with keeping myself on track. When I did finally start to figure out things out, the teachers around me acted strange to me. They made me feel like my elementary school teachers did. And now I know that my teachers were teaching in the way of product. This made me realize that when I decided to be a teacher, I wanted to have an open environment. And now I know that this is called process or praxis ways of teaching. Throughout high school, I always said I wanted to be a nurse or work in the medical field. I was planning to go to Sask Poly, but in my final semester of the 12th grade, I completely changed my mind. I decided to switch to education because I felt like it was my true calling. However, there were certain things that made me uncomfortable about being an educator, like curriculum. That brings me into my talk about curriculum and pedagogy. So let's start with curriculum. I always thought that curriculum was a strict set of rules that every teacher had to follow, that the government had set in place for teachers to reach outcomes. I now know that curriculum is less about rules and more about a guide. In one of my blog posts, I mentioned the Saskatchewan Way, which was a form of curriculum developed by teachers in our communities here in Saskatchewan that helped to develop a new, more inclusive and more cooperative form of curriculum, one that was not aimed at shaping a student to be one thing and rather shaping a student to be who they were meant to be. So that brings me to my point about pedagogy. When I was in high school, I had no idea what the word pedagogy meant until I was taught in ECS 203 what it actually was. I now know that it can be considered as a way that a teacher teaches in their classroom. In my own classroom, I plan on having an open environment where students of any age can come to me for anything they feel they might need. I also plan on having an open environment for students to be able to properly express themselves in the works in my classroom. When I graduated high school, I decided to go to the University of Regina to become an educator, and everything I learned in the past 2 years has opened my eyes to so many things I did not even know about being a teacher. I grew up in a household with teen parents, and on both sides of my family, I am the first to go to university. The one thing that made me uncomfortable, one of the only things that made me uncomfortable so far while learning throughout university, was learning about treaty ed. And a lot of the biases that go along with it. When I had to interpret it into a lesson plan, I thought it would be hard. I'm a First Nations woman who broke the cycle of drug and alcohol abuse in my family, so I was a little bit nervous about doing something involving First Nations people and a lesson plan. But I found that the research that I did for the lesson plan helped to open my eyes even more on treaties and helped me to look over how treaty ed really is and what it can do for students in our community. So that brings me to my educational journey today. Today in ECS 203, I learned more than I expected to. I learned what curriculum and pedagogy really are. I read texts that fed my soul as an educator, and I also made blog posts that started out as an assignment but eventually turned into a way for me to express my opinions and openness to the idea of being an educator. This class has made me realize that no matter what or who I encounter in the classroom, it is my job to follow the rules while still creating a safe, exciting, and open classroom for my future students. There are many unanswered questions for me. Questions like, how do I know I'm following the curriculum correctly? How do I properly teach using pedagogy in my future classrooms? However, there is one thing that is certain for me. This class has set me on the path to following the right direction to becoming an educator.